Good morning. It is May 12th, and recently I've been talking a little bit about my long-term projects, and I'm calling them Hugelkultur just because that's a name of some guy that supposedly invented this style of gardening. And basically, all it is what nature already does on its own, but this guy kind of made it aware to society, and so it was named after him. So it's called Hugelkultur or Hugelkultur. And basically, what it does is, let's say you have, ideally you would like flat ground, but I can't even see what I'm doing here over my phone. So at camp, we have divots where old trees used to be. There might be a old stump there rotten, and then there's another divot, and then there might be another stump and a divot, whatever. And when we first bought camp, our camp lot was like this. I mean, it was horrible to walk on, especially for Paul when he uses a cane and sometimes a wheelchair. You just couldn't do that walking through the woods. Let's say there might be a tree here and a tree here or whatever. So basically what I try to do is I take fallen debris and I've started filling the holes, the divots, and then I'd rake some pine needles and some leaves, and I'd try to mound the depressions. And eventually, as this all decomposes, it will become a more level playing field. So that is like the Mother Nature's style, which is basically the same as a hugelkultur. So there are different styles of hugelkultur, and if you have a depression, you can start filling this with logs, twigs, branches, compost, a little dirt, a bunch of leaves, some grass, and whatever. And you can bring this up to a level playing field. And as it rots, it will kind of go like this right here. So you have to keep filling it. But that's one style. But if you want to dig, you can dig a nice little hole. And you can do the same thing. Just start filling it up and layering it or whatever, mixing things all together. And you want to start out bigger, then get smaller at the top. So you're all the way up to twigs. And basically, because this is ground level here, and the moisture will sink. It will always seek its own level. So it will keep going down or it will keep running off or whatever. But this will hold moisture. And as these rots, it will just continue to maintain its moisture, which will further promote further rot, and eventually over the years it will become soil. Meanwhile, you're adding nutrients to this hole. You're adding a level walking place to this hole. You're adding nutrients, you're keeping moisture, and you're basically doing what Mother Nature does on its own and filling the depressions. So there's that style. There is also a style where you have a flat ground and you just start building it up smaller and 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 smaller until you get to the twigs on top, and then you have your topsoil. So basically, you have your soil here, your compost or your leaves or your hay or whatever. And basically you end up with a nice mound. And as this rots, it will do the same thing as it does here and here. It will maintain moisture. It will help contain the nutrients. And as it breaks down, you're going to end up with a nice mounded area that you can actually plant on. And because this holds its own moisture, either style here, this is great to use in dry areas. You can even use this in the desert because this right here will maintain moisture. So you can actually plant a garden, whether it's a flower garden, vegetable garden, or whatever. You can actually plant on this mound, and the roots will find its way into the moisture and collect the nutrients of the dying debris underneath. And it can prosper very, very well, even in the middle of the desert on a hot, hot, hot summer day. It's going to do very, very well. And the style of Hugelkultur I use at camp, because I've modeled nature and I've observed nature all my life, so this concept is very, very familiar to me, just because I'm a nature geek, if you want to call it that, and I understand the process of the decay and how it benefits the land and how it can benefit people. Basically, at camp, I lay my logs. I start with a border. Okay, pretend these are any log, anywhere between 4 to 6 to 10 to 15 or more inches in diameter. So I have my border. Then I take logs and put them inside this way. Then in between, let's say this is the bottom floor, and then here's your walls here. In between where another log won't fit, even if they're butted up against each other, I'll try to cram some smaller stuff in between here and lay them down in between these rows here. Then I'll start building up and building up. And it's the same concept as up here. I'll just start adding smaller and smaller stuff each layer until I get to the compost layer. Sometimes I'll add nutrients here, like dead grass or live grass or leaves or whatever, just to help maintain that moisture a little bit more. And then I'll top it with compost. And then in the fall, I'll top it with a thing of leaves, and I'll put more compost on it. And then I'll come back in the spring and I can grow. Okay, so that's basically what that style is. That's pretty much what I use at camp. I also use another method called the Keyhole method. And it's named because you take a keyhole design, if I can draw it. Let's say you have your compost in the middle here. Then you have your little walkway. Then you have your little garden out like that. So the idea is you can walk in here without trampling on your garden. And this right here is basically a compost pile. They call it a keyhole because of the shape of this right here. It's kind of like an old-fashioned, remember the old skeleton keys? So you walk in here and you deposit your goods. And in a side view, it'll be raised a little bit, kind of like a Hugelkultur style. And then here's your compost up here. And this will be sloped like this. And here's your ground. Okay, remember this is side view. So basically, if your compost is in a hole like this, and you put your food in here, your scraps in here, and these are all holes in this bucket or this crate or this barrel or whatever you want. And as your compost decomposes, the nutrients leach out. And that's why it's good to have a slope here, because that will encourage the nutrients to run downhill and go further away. So you're feeding your compost. You're feeding your compost, you're feeding your soil, and in turn, you're feeding the plants, and the plants are feeding you. So underneath here, this is a wall. Underneath here, what I do is I combine the Hugelkultur and the Keyhole method together. So I have a self-feeding, self-watering garden bed. And it works very, very, very well. And you should have these like 6 feet apart. So if I have some of my beds, I have 3 or 4. As when I started, I have 3 or 4 of these little keyholes, but they're spaced out in something like that. And they all leach and feed the whole garden bed, which helps these logs decompose a lot faster. Now, you can go out and let's say this is bare ground. You might want a garden here. In a year or so, you can go and just dig a hole. And I've tried to tell people this before. If you don't want to get rid of your compost, your food scraps in the trash because of animals or whatever, go out and dig a hole in your yard. Plop your compost ingredients, your food scraps, into these holes. Cover them up with soil. And these will decompose and feed the soil Even if you're not going to use it in a garden, you're actually putting nutrients back into the soil. And eventually, if you want to come through and next year you want to dig holes here and start filling those, eventually you're going to have a row of very, very nutritious soil to grow your plants. And of course, that's going to hold moisture. It's going to feed the moisture. It's going to leach out into the area around it. It's a really, really cool concept, really, and it's Mother Nature style. They just call it, Hugelkultur in a keyhole. So when I refer to my my mushroom garden at camp, we have this style here. Okay, and I've raised I raised the back end of it, and here's a style here, and I put my little keyhole here. Only in this style, because it was new and I was in a rush, I tended to this back side. And the side two, it's kind of sloped like this, slopes to the south. And I worked this area here, which is this area here, real hard one year. I put fish in there, I put compost tea. I really, really worked this. And I was able to grow, the second year, I was able to grow a garden right there. Now this year, it doesn't slope quite like that. Kind of slopes like this. This year, my keyhole's here. I'll be able to plant through all this bed. And I call it the mushroom garden is because, let's say this right here is my bed. And I have this little container here. And it's like this right here. And this has all kinds of holes in it. And I put food scraps in here. And they go down here. And the nutrients, as they decompose, they leach out, they leach out, they leach out. So, and then I took, in order to keep moisture in there, I took another pail and put it over the top like that. And there's a little hole here, a vent hole, a couple vent holes. So my whole garden on the surface looks like that. So to me, that looked like kind of like a mushroom. So that's why I call that my mushroom garden. But it basically is nothing more than a Hugelkultur style with keyhole in the middle to help distribute the nutrients and help feed the soil and help break down these logs and twigs and stuff underneath. So I hope this helps. I don't know if I explained it well, but I hope it's understandable at least.